Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the community panel. I'm Marcia Holstead, and I'm pleased to introduce our moderator today for the panel. Dazan Dixon Diallo is a recognized visionary and advocate in the struggle for human rights, sexual and reproductive justice, and the fight against HIV with and on behalf of communities of women and girls living with HIV and those affected by HIV and STIs. Dazan is founder and president of Sister Love, established in 1989, which is the first women's HIV, sexual and reproductive justice organization in the Southeastern United States. She is a proud member of In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda Partnership, where she advocates for sexual and reproductive health, rights and justice in public health and prevention policies and programs. Dr. Diallo is a co-chair for the Act Now and AIDS National Coalition. She is a member of several bodies of influence, including the Women at Risk Subcommittee and the Scientific Advisory Group of the HIV Prevention Trials Network. She is highly acclaimed community advocate and a very wonderful moderator for today's session. And I'm going to turn it over to Dazan.
Marcia, thank you so very, very much for that lovely and generous introduction. By the way, I'm like, cut it. But no, thank you so very much for that. I am so excited for us to have this conversation today, and even more excited to engage with your questions and your comments and to have you engage with us. So thank you so much for joining us. And I hear and I understand that it's been an incredible conference so far. And so I am happy that we're sort of pulling in with community. This is, it's my jam, as they say. And I am just thrilled to have with us today, Linda Felix. Hi, Linda.
Hello, hello.
And we have Tony Merritt. Hi, Tony.
Hello.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if y'all can see it, but y'all know our Sergeant in Arms, who is always here and always around to support all of our efforts, especially when we're talking about HIV and aging or HIV in our veteran community. Hi, Reggie. We see you. It's good to have you here.
Nice to see you too, Dazan.
Absolutely. So I'm right on in with our conversation and our questions. And the way we do this here is because we know that everyone has a story. And as my Nana used to tell me, she's like, baby, you better tell your own story, because if you don't, somebody else will tell it for you, and they probably gonna get it wrong. So what I'm gonna start out with is having y'all story. And when I say that, here's what I want. I just want to know who you are, where you are, what you are, who you're from. It's not just, where you're from, but give us a little bit of that background. And if you want to, give us a little bit of a defining moment that's brought you to this moment, like right here, right now. What do you know was that pivot that says, today, here is who I am as Linda, here's who I am as Tony. Let's hear some of that.
Okay, would you like me to start?
Yes, please, Sis Linda.
Well, I'm a born and bred Harlem girl. That's the beginning. That's where I get a lot of my feistiness from. And when I got my master's degree down in Florida, I got a master's in teaching. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where I have been now for 38 years. And in that time, I was diagnosed with HIV in 1986. I was 36 years old, and I have now been positive for 35 years. That says everything to me, because I was told then that I had 10 years, maybe, and I'm still here and I'm thriving. My experience down through the years led me to understand that God had put a mission upon my life. I had the ability to speak, and to speak for those who would not or could not speak for themselves. And that is when I knew that once I really got educated myself, I knew I had to come out and stand in the gap for all of those folks. So I'm a proud member of the 2020 Leading Women's Society. That is a arm of the Sister Love. We are ladies who live openly with HIV and advocate in our communities. I am a member of the WISE CAB, that's the Women's Interagency HIV Study, which has now grown into the MAC cohort because it's men and women, it's an NIH study, and we follow our health and our wellness through our lifetime.
What's a CAB?
That's the Community Advisory Board.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been a member of many of them, as well as the Ryan White Planning Council in years past. So I've got a lot of experience in the community, and I hope that I bring something to the table today that will be a eye opener, a lifter, an uplifter for someone that is out there listening.
I'm coming back to you on that one because I have some follow-up questions for you. But right now, we're going to get Tony's story up in here. Tony Merritt, tell us about you and where you from, who you from, all of that kind of stuff. We at my Nana's kitchen table, and she wants you to tell us all about you and how you got to her table.
Okay, how I got to your table. Tony Merritt, native Georgian, lived here most of my life.
What part? What part of Georgia?
I was born in Palmetto, Georgia, but I live in Epearn.
Well, I'm from Folk Valley, where they say it's all one word. Go on, bro.
Yeah, after a stint in the military and several jobs, I'm back here in Atlanta. But like Linda, I'm a 35-year survivor with HIV. And how I got here, it was several years ago. If I remember correctly, it was a period when I was attending Ryan White CAB, and they were talking about the numbers of people with HIV living in the city of Atlanta, and the number that were, shall we say, transitioning from it and not in healthcare. And I decided at that point, I needed to put a face on this of someone who is a long-term survivor, and so they can see that those of us who survive are living well and healthy, and the importance of being adherent to your medication. And so that's how I found myself in this situation. A little bit about me now. I'm a member of POS Vets, and I'm a member of I'm a chairman of the Community Advisory Board for Positive Living, Positive Healthcare Center, and I'm a member of Thrive. And I became a member of Thrive through being a member of POS Vets when we all joined, when as an organization, we became associated with that organization. And that's where I've had my most interesting period of learning about HIV and advocating. And with that, I became more and more comfortable about disclosing and speaking out. And initially, I will admit, I was not comfortable. But as I became comfortable with that group and also with myself, I had to do this. And so I am very comfortable with what I'm doing. Along with that, I am sort of the co-chair/director of the All at the Table at Hillside International Truth Center, and which is our HIV/AIDS/ organization within that church that's really active. And that was another thing. Just backing up just a little bit, I can remember early on when I was initially diagnosed, and back then, as most of us can remember, people were transitioning left and right. I mean, And I was sitting at Hillside one Sunday morning, and we had a speaker there talking about living and all that was going on with AIDS. And at the time, it wasn't really referred to as HIV. It was just talked about AIDS is what it was. And he made a statement that made me think. And that statement was to live until you die. And I was like, that makes sense. And so with that, I decided that I'm going to continue to live until I die. And unlike what I had considered doing was like cashing in my life insurance and all of that, getting in preparations for. And I said, no, I'm going to live until I die, and I'm going to hold him to that statement. And guess what? Here I am today. So
aren't you glad to cash all that in? Because you probably, you know, might find it absolutely helpful at some point.
It was very helpful. It was very helpful. So that's where I am right now, and living well and enjoying and putting myself out there to say, hey, this is what a 35-year survivor looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, give thanks. I'm loving this full circleness of the conversation that you're having. And 35 is significant. Linda, I think I've been in Atlanta I'm from Georgia too, Fort Valley, Peach County. But I think I've been in Atlanta 1 year more. This is my 39th year, I believe. 82.
And we've known one another all of that time.
Can't do the math. But and 86 was the year I finished college. So this is my 35th year, but I started volunteering in HIV and AIDS 85, 86. So it's my 35th year of being involved in the movement. And I wanted to ask something because you just raised it for me. Actually, both of you have. And it's around the fact that, and I'll just sort of phrase it this way. Last year in March, April, I think in about a week, I must have gotten maybe 3 or 4 calls of people I knew personally who had just passed away or transitioned because of COVID-19. And one call is bad enough. 4 in a week was devastating. And the reason it was devastating most to me is because it took me, it was almost like I was in a time machine where I felt like I was in 1994, 95. Because 94, 95 was probably the most mortifying time for Black folk, especially living with HIV. And here we are 40 years into an epidemic with a brand new pandemic that has a whole lot of the same elements that we have been facing with HIV. The racial justice, the health access, the disparities in terms of how we experience it. I need you to talk just a little bit about bringing forward that experience of seeing and knowing so many people who passed away because of HIV, because of ignorance, because of people's unwillingness to engage in preventive behaviors or to be more respectful of people who were needing help, to what you are and how you are coping and looking at HIV in the COVID-19 era, where folks in your age group are actually the most impacted people now. Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm gonna start with Tony, because you went there first around all those folks, especially within your church family. Can you talk about that a little bit? Bring us from then to now.
It's a year before last, the United States Conference on AIDS. I was at there, and the host group was Native Americans. And during one of the lunch periods, they came out and they did the drumming and everything, and it was so moving. Well, once they finished, they announced basically that not only were they using drummings to summon their spirits, but the African community did the same thing. Well, I'm sitting there listening to them and listening to the drums and all of that. And it was as if I could hear and feel the spirit of all of those friends and people that I know that had transitioned. It was so emotional. Tears were running down my street because I could hear and feel them. And I attribute that emotion to the fact that at Hillside, I learned that the body dies, but that spirit is always there. And so it's something that at points when you need that, or when you feel that, they are there. When you need that assistance, they are there. That spirit is always there. So I felt that at that point, and it was so emotional. Running to several people that I knew that were there, and we all talked about having that same spirit. Well, it bothered me to the point to where I had to speak to my healthcare provider, because we discovered at that point, after talking with him and getting mental help, post-traumatic stress was what I was dealing with. And I had not dealt with that in all of the years of my being positive and living in this community. And as guess what? It was cathartic. It got me through it. And now I'm fine with it. But that was the thing that I had, I guess, held back all of those years until that point. And all of a sudden, it just poured out of me. And so I was able to talk with the psychoanalyst. And also there's a group at Thrive we call Headspace. And on Mondays we meet, and I was able to share that with them. And I found out I wasn't the only one.
Right.
And it was an awesome experience. And so that connection with HIV, therapy, religion, watching all that stuff that's going on really make me a better person, a stronger person. And I'm seeing, I had those moments and those feelings when I had to deal here recently with friends and relatives who made their transition as the results of COVID. So I think I'm going full circle with it,
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
And by the way, you mentioned Hillside. There are two things I want to just raise up. One is all of us here send, at least I know I do, and I'm sure I could speak on behalf of people who might not have even known her, but please accept, as an intimate personal member of Hillside, our condolences for the passing of Reverend Dr. Barbara.
Yeah.
I know how much she meant to the church and to the whole community, and the fact that she was one of the first faith open their doors to people living with HIV, and that inclusivity meant so much to so many. And the second one is to just give a shout out to Brother Pastor Cedric Garner,
Yes,
who has been in the work forever. And I know that he's been a part of your HIV ministry at the Hillside, and bring it forward for some of us who are all in this aging factors, that there are those of us who have been living with HIV in our lives, even if it wasn't in our bodies. And we've been aging with this whole thing. And Cedric is one of my buddies from back in the 80s when I just got started. So please send him our love. Linda, talk about your own staging or your own experience, because 35 years is that's a generation, that's other people's lifetimes, and you have now come from one epidemic to this new pandemic. Talk about your own sensitivities around that from then to now, please.
Well, from the very beginning of the pandemic, I began making the correlation between HIV, AIDS, and the COVID pandemic. The same kind of denial, the same activity that surrounded the pandemic. It was like reliving HIV in the late 80s and the 90s. As you said, in the early 90s, people were dying. Week after week, we were going to funerals. That's back when you and I met back then, Dejan.
Yep.
And so we know that it was a really rough time. And the same thing going on with COVID. Then when the drug companies started talking about trying different therapies, I was hearing medications and antiretroviral and tapping into the RNA and of the virus. And I say, boy, you know, I wonder what these people would do if they said, this is the HIV/AIDS virus of the 21st century, because that's what it is. That's what I have experienced. I have experienced the HIV/AIDS epidemic of the 20th century be remanifested in the 21st century as the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
And the education that I received through all the various venues that I have been attached to over the years have helped me to be able to speak to the COVID epidemic just as I'm able to speak to HIV. I believe in science. I trust the scientists associated, because I know some of those names, like Dr. Fauci, like Dr. Collins, like the people at Morehouse School of Medicine and Emory, who were involved with Ebola and who were involved with SARS and who were intricately involved in AIDS.
Yes.
So I can say, yes, I was first to take one of the vaccines, the Moderna, because I know, and the other thing, let me go back even further. I was a child of the polio epidemic. And I remember taking I remember walking across the stage in my junior high school or elementary school, wherever it was, and getting that little sugar cube with the pink dot inside and taking that polio vaccine, because I knew a kid with polio and I never wanted that to happen to me. So I know what science can do. I believe in science, and I trust the scientists and the people who are engaged in this. And so I speak out and speak up, encouraging people of all ages to be vaccinated, to save their lives. Yes, you might get a little sick from the vaccination. You might get a little tired. You might get a headache, but you won't get in the grave.
Well, there is that. There are other ways to get in the grave, but with that vaccine, it will not be COVID. And I actually wanted to bring you, so you made me think of something else. I know that somebody's going to have a birthday coming up soon, and that they're going to be turning a little bit north of 70, and that they're very, very proud of that. I want to talk about this whole notion of aging, right? And that there's so much conversation on aging and HIV. Talk to me a little bit about, what do you see, if any? Is there a difference in how you think about or approach coping with aging, just because humans get older, and we all are, if we're living this long? That there's aging and everything that already comes with that. And then there's aging with HIV, and there are things that come with that. Tell me, which one concerns you the most? Which one do you spend more time thinking about? Which one do you have to end up dealing with the most? Is it aging because I'm a human that's lived this long? Aging because I have HIV and I'm still alive this long? Which one is sort of top or comes to you more? And talk about why that is, and how you balance that out. Start with you, Linda, because it's going to be your birthday.
Well, Tony,
it's also because I don't know when Tony.
Dejan, you froze just then. Okay, there you go. Tony mentioned it, and I know that Reggie's a part of it. I was graced to be asked to be a participant and appear in the movie Colors on the Wall, that spoke with those of us across the spectrum living with HIV. We were all long-term survivors. And as I said in the movie, HIV doesn't scare me at all. What scares me is the thought of losing my mind. I have seen two people who have lived and died with Alzheimer's and the degeneration brought about by Alzheimer's. And I have become like the old folks in church when I was growing up. Every morning I wake up and I say, thank you, Lord, for waking me this morning with a reasonable portion of health and closed in my right mind.
Mm.
Because that is the thing. I feel wonderful. I was just last week, I was in Vegas and we went to the Grand Canyon. The only thing I did not do was climb the mountain because I realized that I got a bad ankle because I've broken it a couple of times doing stuff over the years because I've always been very active. And because I am 70 years old, I said, nah, maybe I better not climb the mountain. I'll take the view from here.
My bucket list is almost full. I don't need to add that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So that's it. HIV and AIDS, we are now on the cusp of a vaccine. We are on the cusp of it. Mm-hmm. And I will be here to receive it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I plan to stay around another 30 years, so y'all won't be able to get rid of me anytime soon.
That's right. I know that's right. Well, thank you for that. Because I'm just a little younger than you, but I do the same because Alzheimer's is a thing, and it's genetic in a lot of respects. And I have a father who is dealing with my father. Now I have a father, but my father is dealing with that now, and I take after his side of the family. So you can only imagine how this weighs on you from the minute you become aware of that. Yes. And it almost ages you thinking about it in some ways. Tony, how about you? Aging because you aging and aging with HIV, how does that weigh for you? And when is your birthday?
My birthday is January 16th.
All right, now, happy belated.
And so I'm in my 74th year right now, midway.
And look wonderful.
Yeah. But
I love.
As far as health is concerned, I've dealing with HIV and aging at some point, and I don't remember how many years ago, but it's been several, that I was speaking with my healthcare provider, and I said, can you be also my primary care physician? I said, because, bouncing back between you and the doctor, and I don't see him unless I got a problem. And he said, yeah, I can handle that. And so as a result, he began to run tests, and I found out that I had a heart murmur that I hadn't known about. And also my PSA was slowly on the climb. Okay. And over the years, it slowly creeped up to the point to where I had to go see a urologist, and found out that it had progressed into prostate cancer. And so as a result of having HIV and visiting the doctors on a regular basis, I found out that I had health challenges that I possibly would have never found out, and particularly about the prostate cancer. That was the thing right there. That got my attention. And, we resolved the problem with the house prostate cancer with isotope implants. So now they're just monitoring me, and my heart is doing fine, even though with the murmur, I'm in good shape. But that I will tell people, one of the positive things about HIV is that I found I had health challenges that I possibly would not have. And with prostate cancer, it could have been really deadly. And so I don't want to say I'm grateful for it, but I'm grateful for it. That, and being consistent and adherent with the healthcare, that has actually saved my life. And so aging and with this disease, yes, and all the things that come along with it. But right now I can say I'm living fairly healthy. I'm good.
Yes. So look at here. I just got reminded, Reggie, I don't know why I thought you my co-facilitator, my co-signer. I thought you were just going to jump in here, but I owe you an apology, and I want to come back around to you and get you to weigh in on all three questions I done asked so far. So give us a little bit about your story, Brother Reggie. And also, if you want to talk about this COVID situation and where we've come from and where we are now in terms of where you were with HIV and COVID and how those two things how you have, what has HIV meant in terms of coping with COVID? And then, of course, I really do want to know about this aging versus situation. So tell us about Brother Reggie Dunbar, and please accept my apology. Charge it to my,
it's all good.
heart.
We're all humans.
I love you.
Right. Anytime we think we're not humans, we are not. Actually, I was born in North Carolina. Went in the military right after high school. Was not planning to. Was planning to actually go to college. Wind up going to Vietnam for a little while and got back to the States. Survived that. Went to college, and actually, when I left North Carolina, I moved to Atlanta in 78. So I've been here since 78. I believe, if not mistaken, I got involved in HIV very, very, very early, back in the early 80s. And as Linda and Tony had alluded or said, it was not HIV at that time. It was just strictly AIDS. Mm-hmm. Got involved. We had people, we were going to funerals day in, day out. People wouldn't touch people. People had plates. Families were kicking people out, etc. Mm-hmm. So I was one of those kind of people that was go around, drive my friends, pick them up, take them to pay their bills, because there was no such thing as paying bills by phone and all of that back then. We just really kind of connected. And so a friend of mine, I was a volunteer at the library, and a friend of mine worked there, and he said, there's an organization that helps people living with HIV. And I said, well, what is it? And he took me to a Ryan White meeting, and I've been there ever since, yes, which is probably over 20.
I remember.
Yeah.
And you've not just been and you've not been there ever since. You've also been a leader. And so thank you for your leadership with the Ryan White process and the Ryan White program, because I think that has signaled a lot for a lot more people, especially positive vets, to be engaged in not only their own healthcare, but in the whole process of providing services and care and treatment for people living with HIV. So thank you for your leadership.
And my particular focus is with veterans that are living with HIV. Mm-hmm. Many veterans were kicked out of the military in the early days.
Right.
I mean, they're actually veterans that are part of POS vets now that they found out they were positive. They were out of the military within weeks. And so many of them are still dealing with mental anguish and mental illnesses and mental challenges as a result of that. Mm-hmm. Along with financial and other things. Now the military does not kick you out, but you still have to deal with it from how do I know, how do I tell, who do I tell, etc. We have members that are members of POS vets. In fact, one of them, I actually wanted for him to be doing this panel instead of myself, but he could not come out and expose himself because of recordings, etc. But right. He is still active duty. He is actively living with HIV and doing well. So mm-hmm. Now you have people who are living with HIV in the military. You have veterans who are living with HIV out of the military. And as my co-panelist said earlier, we have people now that everybody's exposed to COVID. You either have it or you're exposed in a combination. Mm-hmm. So now we are just really, a lot of the issues and things that we dealt with in the early days of HIV, we're dealing with in COVID. My concern is that the military is not really addressing that. They're sugarcoating it. They're hiding things. We had an administration that would not allow people to be who they were actively in the military. And fortunately, the first part of the year that changed. So people now are beginning to to be who they are, be they transgender, be they male, be they female, be they bisexual, whatever. And that's a tremendous relief. But again, there's a big educational thing that we have to bridge the community of veterans in with the community of non-veterans.
Right.
Because everybody thinks that the VA just provides everything, just go down there and they're just going to do everything for you. No. You know, veterans, homelessness, drug issues, et cetera, et cetera. So
the mental health issues, because when Tony was talking about PTSD from the lived experience of being a witness to so many lives leaving us because of the virus, that the veteran experience of post-traumatic stress is so much deeper and it's so much more complex and complicated by the military experience, really, not only just war, but the whole idea and the whole notion of war readiness and the ability to be prepared for losses of mass levels. Because, you know, if we've lived long enough, we all have relatives who served in one war or another, and especially if you're Black in the South. And so I think that that's a story that you're sharing that is so important and so powerful. And it actually brings me to think about this. So right now, we know, especially I'm sure from a lot of the data that's been shared during this conference, is that at least in the United States, we've got a majority of the people who are living with HIV are over 50, probably will be over 60 within the next 5 years. So you have a pretty big bulge of aging people living with HIV. But there's this thing that we're seeing there's an uptick in younger people becoming newly infected, and the fact that the United States is seeing a youth bulge, so that by the time in the next 20 years or so, we will actually have more young people than we do old people. So I think about all three of you as community activists, advocates, leaders who are aging into Methuselah, because y'all ain't going nowhere. But there's also this whole generation of people who will be in a majority at some point and still young living with HIV. So and in the military, I can imagine that you have to deal with this all the time anyway, as veterans, is in terms of the intergenerational dynamics of dealing with HIV from a community perspective. So I'm going to start with you, Reggie, and then I'm going to come around, Tony, and then Linda. Just talk to me about your experiences or your thoughts about how you're bridging this intergenerational dynamic living with HIV as an older person, because there's also people who were born living with HIV who now are in their 30s, right? And so they might have as long a life with HIV as you have. Talk about this intergenerational dynamic from where you sit and where you enter into community space.
One of the things that is really, really important is that one of the things we understand, particularly as Black people, is we understand villages. And when we realize in our own personal families, as well as outside of our families, that we are a village. And part of that village is having elders and having people who will eventually become elders. And so I personally am very, very attracted to people who don't know, who are new in the field of HIV, who are wanting to know, how do you do this? How do you do that? And fortunately, that we've been blessed to be able to live here, we have experienced things that we can share with other people who have not experienced it. And hopefully in some things they won't have to experience. And that is where the real bridge is. There has to be a very effective, direct communication and advocacy. I think about bridging. I remember I learned about Positive Living Conference from you, Dazon. I remember getting on the bus and the van and the sardines with some of our riders and going to Florida. That was my very first understanding and exposure to positive living conference. So that's the bridge. We have to remember that we are all bridges. You know, people have different levels of expertise and understanding, but we're all in this world together.
I love that. We are all bridges. Man, that's a t-shirt. Thank you so much for that, Reggie. I'm serious. You know, you can do that now and go make some money and raise some money for PosVet. Tony, intergenerational dynamics in the world that you move in terms of HIV.
Yeah. With me, and I was thinking about it, and I saw a statement a couple of days ago that said, I tell my story so that someone else can survive. And I like that, because that reinforces the fact of why I'm willing to step out and tell my story so that somebody else can survive. Because that was one of the things that got me started, was the fact that so many people were transitioning, and they didn't know that adherence to the medication, you could end up being possibly a person like me, a long-term survivor. And so that was something that was really, really important to me, of stepping out. And I'm able to do that. One of the ways is through the Community Advisory Board at Positive Healthcare Center. You know, before COVID, we had a fairly large group of people attending on a weekly basis. And so we could tell those stories, or we could hear them tell their stories about their experiences with living with HIV and advocating, because there are a lot of people that are really out there advocating for knowledge and understanding about this disease, but because of COVID, they're no longer able to do that. And so I'm excited about having, you know, these vaccines, so that at some point we will be able to gather again, and then all of those people will be able to get out and say. But one of the things, and Reggie mentioned the Positive Living Conference, that was an incredible experience for me. I had no idea anything like that was going on. In fact, that was one of my first conferences, even before AIDS Watch and the USA's Conference on AIDS. And I was truly blown away. And the year that I went, Ryan White's mother was the featured speaker. And I was just blown away to hear her story. And so that was one of those inspiring moments that, yes, you're here at the right time, doing the right thing. So continue to do that.
Yes, I love this.
Yeah.
I think that there's so much in terms of the wisdom that you're talking about. I also know, Linda, that there's other things intergenerational, especially for women. A better way to say this is that, as someone who is in my other side of 55, there's this whole notion of menopause, what I call mental pause, because that's really what happens. And so many things that neither, as much as we had conversations, my mama didn't tell me, my grandmama didn't tell me, you know, there are things about aging as women with HIV, that there are things that young women, even those who may have been living with HIV their entire lives, don't know and aren't being told, because without HIV, these conversations aren't necessarily happening. Talk about a little bit more in terms of, maybe even from a sexual reproductive health standpoint, the intergenerational dynamics that you have engaged with young people who are or are not living with HIV, or with people who are living with HIV and are in this activist space alongside you. What are those kinds of issues or concerns or dynamic experiences that you have from an intergenerational standpoint, especially given a cisgender woman's experience?
Well, Reggie touched upon the phrase, the village. We are a village. And I am one of the elders in the village. and I embraced that status. And for that reason, I participate in various research projects because, as you said earlier, there are those that we know who were born HIV positive. They are in their 30s now. They are 35, 33, 30 years old, 28 years old. Well, how has my body aged over 30 years with HIV? What differences have manifested themselves physiologically as a woman with HIV, living with HIV in all these years, and they growing into their womanhood? And understanding that you are, so this is an old phrase, but it's still very poignant. You are not HIV. HIV lives with you. So your life is not formed or informed by HIV. You are still able to be loved, to love, to have the personal relationships that anyone else would have. And the HIV, as Tony said, if you're adherent to your medications and you go to your doctor's appointments, you will be in better health than anybody around you, number one. And so childbearing is a possibility for you, just as though you were not positive. You can bring a healthy child into this world. And because of your HIV status, you can teach that child from the very beginning how to protect and care for his or herself. Something, and have those conversations. Disclosure is something that still to today is scary for many, many people for all kinds of reasons. But as a mother, to disclose to your child, you are educating your child on how to protect themselves from ever having to experience the STDs, the STIs that are the doorway to the HIV and the AIDS. You are able to teach them how to speak up for themselves because you have learned to speak up for yourself.
Yeah.
Amazing. So you all, it's almost as if you've been reading my notes over the last 2 days of the questions I wanted to ask, because you keep bringing, you're ahead of me in the asking. So I actually, Linda, you just sparked two. I have one that came in also as a comment. So I'm going to raise this because you now have mentioned it. And then I also have a question. We're going to get to the Q&A, and I want to remind everybody who is participating, thank you so much again for joining us. Please, if you have a question or a comment, you can put it in the chat, or you can also put it in the Q&A that's here in at the bottom of your screen. Linda, you talked about research. Comments that came in was about how folks were really interested in us bringing up the neurocognitive problems that happen as people age, period. But what does it mean differently with HIV? Because there are some questions about how long-term use of antiretrovirals and all kinds of different things that may have a different impact. My question isn't specifically about the neurocognitive problems per se, but about the field of research for people who are aging or for older people who are living with HIV. We know that there's lots of research going on around comorbidities, like with cardiovascular or with kidney and liver concerns, with cancer concerns, like the one that Tony has already mentioned with prostate cancer. What do you think is not happening? What are some of the research gaps for people who are living with HIV, that if someone was saying, we're crafting a whole new research agenda on people who are getting older and living with HIV, what would you say, this is one of my priority pieces that I think you all have not yet begun to tap? Linda, what do you think some of that might be?
For women, weight.
Ah,
How does one tackle weight loss or weight gain, whatever it might, you know, we have to, for example, we have to take our meds with food. And I think also with aging, you have to eat on a regular basis, maintain one's energy level. But what happens is your metabolism slows down. So then you find yourself weighing 20 pounds, 30 pounds more than you've ever weighed in your entire life. So,
and given that you've been always such a slim, tiny person, this must be something alarming for you.
it is so, I am so tripped out. I weigh more than I have ever weighed. In pregnancy, never weighed this much. Okay. And so you want to exercise, but the exercise, and you do exercise, the exercise doesn't take the weight off.
Right.
What is it? Is there something about our medications that we know that the fat moves around and finds places to live, vis-a-vis the buffalo hump in the back, or that goiter type growth that in the throat. We had back in the 80s, we talked, or the 90s, we talked about Crick's belly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Crixivan is gone, but the belly is still there. So we need some research to talk about how these medications making the changes, what changes are they bringing about physiologically in our body?
Yes.
And how they are manifesting themselves visually. One's stamina is something that, might need to be looked at. I'm proud to say that just this past month, I have participated in a study from Dr. Anderson at Emory University. And it looked at one's stability, because fear of falling,
yes,
as you age.
Yes.
Okay. So it tested that. It looked at your cognitive abilities, your ability to manipulate and use your hands and the eye and hand and eye coordination, hearing tests. That was fantastic. I mean, this thing had something in the background telling the story, but there were some sentences that were totally unrelated that you had to be able to catch when that thing was thrown in there and say. So how sharp is your mind?
Yes.
How good is your hearing? How are you able to do more than one thing at one time? These are the things that really need to be looked at and compared with people who are not HIV positive as with people who are positive, to see if there's any difference. And as I said earlier, this also will be of value to those who were born with HIV,
right?
So that they can see that, is it the HIV that has caused some premature aging that they might be subject to, and how that could be addressed to cut it off at the path.
Yeah, there was a woman who was diagnosed when she was 18 in Atlanta, and she went and started her own organization. Once I mention all of this, you'll know who she is. And I distinctly remember that she had a hip replacement surgery in her late 30s, and that it was because of premature aging in her bones, basically. So that was our friend Dawn Averett, who started the Well Project, right? And she talked openly about this, rapid aging that's happening for some folks. And it may or may not be specific to the medications or a combination of the medications and the virus. But thank you for that, Linda. That was spot on. Tony, what would you put into the research agenda?
Yeah, the thing with me with the weight thing, when she mentioned it, I was having a challenge with weight. And during COVID, I decided, I said, I'm not going to take on those extra pounds and everything. And so I got into an exercise program on the internet. To be honest with you, I got interested in it because the guy doing the exercise, it was easy on the eye, shall I say.
Right now. Wait, what you said you got involved with like an online, because you cut out just a little bit for me. You found a fitness program.
Online fitness program. And like I said, the guy was easy on the eye. And as a result of that, I was able to actually lose 20 pounds because the exercises and the weight, the diet and everything, and it did it. And I actually got out and exercised more. I'm very familiar with the Beltline on the west side of Atlanta, and walking around the golf course, whatever it is, I'm out doing it. And that's one of the groups at Thrive. We have a Saturday walking group that we walk every Saturday, weather permitting. And yes, and so that's one of the things that handle my weight problem.
Awesome. Reggie, thank you so much, Tony. What would you throw in the research mix, Reggie?
I think mental health is probably something that is very, very relevant, particularly for younger people. They have to understand something, that as you age, there are some common denominators that occur. One is living, and you have to have somewhere to live, whether it's under a tree or in a home. And that has to be paid for. Someone has to pay for gas, electric, etc. And so, Georgia Power doesn't say, well, you're living with HIV, so you don't have to pay your electricity. You need transportation, whether it's MARTA or your own car. Those things have to be paid for. So I think getting younger people to understand that there are some common denominators that, regardless of your health condition, that you need to be prepared for, and you need to prepare either, particularly on a monthly basis, and have some backup so that when hiccups come in your life, that you don't have to do the GoFundMe to everybody who you don't even know anyway, and be ready for yourself. I tell people, my kids, I say, get you a credit card that you don't even use. Don't use it. Just have it there for a real emergency. And that way you're prepared, because if you can't borrow from yourself, or if you won't pay yourself back, you're not going to pay anybody else back.
I'm muting myself because my dog is not as quiet and sweet and cute as yours. My dog is, I can hear him from the other side wreaking havoc. So that's why I had to put myself on mute. But look, I have a question in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and ask this one because y'all know I'm about to get saucy. Y'all met Dazon, y'all know me. So let me just get this one in from the Q&A. And I remind people again that please engage with us. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have information that you want to share, please put it in the chat feature or in the Q&A section that's at the bottom of your screen. You just click on it and then type what you want in, and we'll get to that. We have a few more minutes to have this conversation, so please send us your questions. This is a specific question, which I think comes in just sort of following on that intergenerational conversation, which is, what advice would you give someone who is newly diagnosed so that they age successfully? Now, it doesn't say how old they were when they got diagnosed. So just pick that for yourself, because there are people who are aged already reasoned and are newly getting diagnosed with HIV. So pick your spot wherever you want to go in on that. And whoever wants to tackle that first, please do. What advice giving someone who's newly diagnosed so that they can age successfully?
I would tell anyone that the most important thing for you to do is to keep a positive frame of mind and to adhere to your medication and be open and honest with your medical providers. You cannot expect the doctor to know how to best service you if you don't give them the best information, and be engaged in that medical service.
Mm-hmm.
You might not want to read all of the stuff that goes, but find a resource, find someone that you trust, that you can talk with.
Yes.
And bounce questions off of, and that will help you to thrive.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to take that one, Tony?
Yeah. One of the things that I learned early on was when a thought comes to my mind is something to ask the doctor, write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Write it down. And so when you walk into that doctor's office, and before I had a pad, now I can put it on the phone. I got all the questions right there, and you share that information. One other thing, share some intimate details with your physician. They need to know those things about you that you haven't shared with anybody else, because that will determine your health care and what they recommend and what they suggest. I also shared family situations, because all of a sudden for someone, my healthcare provider was noticing stress. And he said, what's going on in your life? And when I shared that with him, that opened up our relationship even more. And so even though that's been like 10 years ago, but he still asked about that particular family situation that I was dealing with that was drastically affecting me. So yes, I mean, we after that, in a few other situations, we share no secrets.
Wow. You just reminded me, one of our other elders in the HIV world who just started her own nonprofit, had started some other work that she did a while ago. We're talking about Sister Tammy Kinney, talks about in the Everyone Has a Story video, she's about, you got to tell your provider everything, the good, bad, and the ugly. So yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying, Tony. What you got to add to that question, Reggie, around what would you tell somebody so that they age successfully when they're newly diagnosed?
There has to be a balance between medical, mental, financial, and spiritual.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot in under 15 words. I mean, that's amazing. Yeah. Balance between the medical, the mental, financial, and the spiritual.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I think anybody should take that and run with that for successful aging.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
The balance part, that's the hard thing. So is that something that you have learned to practice, or that's something that you come, how do you find that balance, Reggie?
I really found the balance by being imbalanced in one of those areas. And as a result, I had to turn around and balance it on the other. It's almost like a person who's hearing impaired. They don't hear very well, but they are very, very magnified in other areas.
Yes. I understand that one clearly. Excellent. All right. So, I have another one. Let me get to this one, because the question I have last is the one I just want us to run out with, because I'm about to turn it up. So here's a question that's coming from our friend Ted, who says, in what ways do you feel that the experience of having lived with HIV and having grown older is different from being older and newly diagnosed with HIV? So you got diagnosed younger and you've lived with it longer versus being an older person who was newly diagnosed. What do you think that differences in experiences might be? That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Because you think you've gotten through all of the major stressors in life, right? And whether you are in a relationship that's long-term or not, you are, you know how they say once you reach a certain age, I know at 50, I already started that I don't care what anybody says. I'm also not caring what I say, and I dare somebody, you find you're already comfortable with yourself by that time. And then this news comes along versus learning how to become comfortable with yourself because you've been living with HIV for such a long time. So I'm wondering what you think about this difference, because this is a powerful question.
Well, and I think where I would address that would be on the spiritual plane, because as you've aged, I just thought about Richard Pryor. You don't get to be old being okay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The wisdom that comes with aging. So I would think that if I were just being diagnosed today, it would be because there is some blessing for me in that. I see, and I know that I believe that you all will understand where I come from because you've been there. I see my diagnosis as having been a blessing to me because I am in medical care on a regular basis. There's nothing that goes awry with me. Wait a minute, why that number looks so strange? What's happening here? Mm-hmm. You've not been drinking enough water, Linda. You need to drink some more water. Okay, increase my water. Whatever the case may be, that those people who are walking around in the street who's got all kind of things wrong with them, and they don't know and they don't address it. They just, this hurts, and I get a pain in my stomach every time I eat that, but they keep eating and don't know. We don't have that. So I think if I would have been older, and being the person of a spiritual foundation as I am, I would still see that as God having a blessing somewhere in there for me and for someone else through me.
Yeah.
And I only can guess. I mean, because like you said, we're not there.
Yeah. For me, as far as being diagnosed later in life, one of the advantages that comes with that is now you're seeing a healthcare provider on a regular basis. So if there are anything that your body has been dealing with and telling you over the years, but you've chosen to ignore, guess what? They're going to become front and center, and now you're going to deal with it. And so as a result, your life will actually get better. Yes, you're dealing with this virus, but also you're getting healthcare on other parts of your body that were going wrong at the time, that now, guess what? They're being solved, or they're being handled, or they're being medicated, whatever it is required for you to have a better quality of life. Yeah. Muted.
I've got to, thank you. I'm sitting up here co-signing and nodding and talking to my mic, my selfie mic check. So I've got two more questions in the Q&A, and I'm going to just ask one of you to answer each one of those, because my final question, we've got about 10 minutes left. My final question is going to be for all three of y'all, right? So we've got a question about experiencing stigma, either from HIV, aging, or both. And I'm going to throw that one to Linda. And then Reggie, I'm going to go ahead and tee you up for the next question, which is a two-parter, but it talks about activism And I know that you've been heavily engaged in that. The lessons from the HIV activist and advocacy community, do you think that there are lessons that we can apply from that to the struggle for racial justice and human rights? And are there ways that you would like to see researchers support those specific? It's about HIV activism. How does that transfer or translate into the racial justice and human rights work movement stuff that's happening or should have been happening all along? Because I see HIV as a human rights movement anyway. And are there things that researchers can do to support that? So think about that one, Reggie. Linda, talk about stigma, whether it's from aging or HIV or both.
Yes, stigma is real. And stigma grows out of ignorance. Now, there are some people who are just uneducable because they just choose to be, okay? But stigma is paired with disclosure in my mind. And all of that disclosure must be made from a standpoint of strength and knowledge. When you know more about this disease, this chronic disease, just like diabetes, you are able to speak from a platform of knowledge. And when you know what you know what you know, and nobody can tell you something that ain't what it is. So the stigma that's associated with HIV, take that and empower yourself with the knowledge of who you are and the aging, and stand proud.
Yeah.
So often you hear women don't tell their age, or you don't ask the woman her age, or I don't tell nobody. My birth. That's why I am so proud to say, to recognize that I have lived this long. And I've got a story to tell. And I'll stand on the top of that mountain in Grand Canyon and shout it across the world.
All right. Now, thank you. I appreciate that. Reggie, activism, our reproductive justice. Y'all know I live in reproductive justice, racial justice, human rights. How can researchers support that?
Well, I think we have to understand something about activism. Everything that we've ever achieved in this life has come about as a result of activism. MLK was activist. The slave revolt was an activist. Unfortunately, the days that are happening now, we have to allow and get people. Ryan White came about as a result of activism. Jeannie came in, once Ryan had passed on and got Congress involved. And I think we have to do the same thing when it comes to our health, when it comes to our finances, when it comes to our mental health, when it comes to our spirituality, when it comes to our communities. We need to realize that, the world is about people. And all these other things are things to support life for people. Researchers have a job to research, but we have a job to show the researchers how to work. It's like in HIV. I remember very, very early in the research, everybody was talking about HIV, but they were not talking to people who were living with HIV. They were not including people who were living with HIV. They were talking about as opposed to talking to. And that's what we have to do now. We have to bring things full face. We have to call a spade and not be afraid.
Yeah. I am so in with that. I think about the 4 elements of Brian Stevenson's framework for sustaining social justice. And, he spoke to the US Conference on AIDS one year that just blew my mind. And he talks about proximity, being proximate to the people who are or making sure that they're proximate to the people who make all the decisions. Talked about changing the narrative. You know, I think about the Denver Principles was the first example of that, where we went from, you know, calling people, refusing to be called AIDS victims and standing tall as people living with HIV, and then protecting hope is another one, which I think all three of you have given us ways in how we can see that gets done and how you do that. And then the fourth one, of course, is you have to be willing to get uncomfortable, be uncomfortable, and make others uncomfortable. And if I may just stand in here as a community researcher and as someone who has to work with researchers all the time, is that the first and foremost thing I think that researchers can do is to dismantle the context of research that is built around white supremacy and patriarchy. That's the first thing that you have to do, which is to find ways to make sure privilege is not a factor in who does the research and who decides what research gets done, and in for whom and with whom the research is actually happening. And so I think that that's probably first and foremost from my standpoint, because we've had to have that same fight within the HIV community for a very long time around inclusion, around for everybody, for what we bring to the table, including our lived experience. I got 3 minutes. So each one of y'all gets 1 minute or less. And here's my question. I want to thank all the people who've written in the chat feature and in the Q&A. My question is this one. I know Tony knows it's coming. Ray might know it's coming. So I'm gonna start with you, Linda. How's your sex life, Miss I'm Aging with HIV? Talk about that, please.
Well,
In a minute or less.
in a minute or less. The truth is that after my husband died, after my third last husband, because I've been married 3 times, okay, I have not been sexually active. And I'm okay with that because I like me. I'm okay with being with me, you know. Now that, because, and this is why I need COVID to be over, because I want to go dancing. I love to dance.
Hello.
All right. And as long as I'm out in the world, I'm good to go.
Yes.
Because there's a lot left in the tank.
Well, you know, there's a lot more to pleasure than sex. So I should also ask, how's your pleasure life if it ain't sexual? So I thank you for expressing that. So I'm gonna ask that differently, because I can get my pleasures in all kinds of ways.
That's
and
right.
sex is a part of that. But so let's go with you. So Reggie, I'm gonna throw it to you. How's your pleasure life and your sex life, if you want to answer either one or both?
Okay. Well, actually, I'm doing pretty much the same thing I've normally done. I'm going out and talking with people and stuff, etc. Sexually wise, I'm as opposed to being a full menued sexual person. Sometimes I just do the appetizer.
Some things.
Yes.
It's not an all or nothing. It's not a zero-sum game, right?
That's right. Right.
You make your way and you find your pleasures.
That's
Appreciate
it.
that. Tony, last word.
Yeah. My sexual life is sexual. I'm good with where I am right now. The COVID thing has put a damper on it as far as really getting out there and everything and exploring different people. But I'm good. I'm good.
Excellent.
I'm good. Yes.
I'm grateful to you all for answering that question, because I think it's important for people to hear and to know that, especially with all that we know around HIV, all of the new technologies and all the new news around suppression and U equals U, or undetectable equals untransmittable, and the fact that people, no matter what their ages are sexually active. I think that folks need to hear that and know that. And that's probably another research gap that we want to emphasize. Thank you so much, Linda Felix, Tony Merritt, Reggie, and to the folks at Emory. Thank you for having these sessions and for including me. I am so grateful to you. And we are out of time. And so I'm going to kick it back to Marsha. Thank you for being with us today.
And thank you for being an excellent moderator and host this Days On. Did a great job.
Y'all made it so easy. It's my pleasure.
Thank you all very, very much. Thanks, Dazan and the panelists, Linda, Anthony, Reggie. It was a wonderful panel. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your insights on aging and advocacy, research, and life in general. We all learned a lot. And now we've come to the end of our conference. We want to thank everybody for attending the conference and hope that you've had a great experience. The issues surrounding health disparities, COVID, and older adults and persons aging with HIV are many. And we hope you come away with a better understanding of these issues and some potential solutions and strategies to improve them for those aging with HIV. I think we still have a lot of work to do. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Molly Perkins.
Now, I just want to join Marcia in thanking everyone again, including all of the fantastic presenters, moderators, community panelists, and attendees. We also just cannot thank Anita Amin enough. We could never have navigated this virtual conference without her. And finally, we both want to thank our fantastic conference planning committee, who in addition to me and Marcia included Drenna Waldrop, Ken Hepburn, Reggie Dunbar, Cynthia Allen, Shelley Bryant, and Jenny Anderson, as well as our fantastic executive board and science board members. And I just, I'm sad that we weren't all able to be together in person, and hopefully the next time we do this, we will be. So just thank you so much.